What if the foods you've been eating to protect your heart are actually the ones quietly hardening your arteries? What if the items you reach for at the grocery store, the ones with the heart-healthy labels, the ones your doctor casually mentioned years ago, the ones you feel good about putting in your cart, are doing damage that won't show up until it's serious? I know that's a hard thing to hear, but stay with me, because what I'm about to share could be one of the most important things you watch this year. Because heart disease doesn't announce itself, it builds in silence. And sometimes the very habits we believe are protecting us are the ones feeding that silence the most. Every year in this country, hundreds of thousands of people over 60 have their first heart attack without any prior warning they recognized. No dramatic chest pain for weeks beforehand. No obvious sign that something was building. Just a life that felt mostly normal. And then a moment that changed everything. And when doctors look back at the lifestyle of those patients, one of the most consistent patterns they find is this. People were eating foods they genuinely believed were safe, foods with healthy reputations, foods that carry a kind of cultural trust that goes back decades. And that trust, in some cases, was misplaced. If you've been feeling more tired than you think you should, if you've noticed a shortness of breath climbing stairs that wasn't there a few years ago, if your ankles sometimes swell by evening, if your blood pressure numbers have been creeping upward despite your best efforts, these are quiet signals worth taking seriously. And in the next several minutes, I'm going to walk you through 5 specific foods that carry a healthy reputation, but are, for many people over 60, actively contributing to arterial damage. I'll also explain exactly what is happening inside your arteries when you eat them, and what you can do differently starting this week. And before we dive in, if you're someone who values honest, research-grounded health information that actually applies to life over 60, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Here at Dr. Silas Redford Wellness, we are committed to giving you the kind of detail that a 15-minute doctor's appointment rarely has time for. Your support keeps this work going. Now, let's talk about your arteries. Let me start with a man named Raymond. Raymond is 70 years old, lives outside of Phoenix, Arizona, and spent his career as a civil engineer. He's not overweight, he doesn't smoke, he walks 3 miles most mornings, and takes his blood pressure medication faithfully. By every surface measure, Raymond is doing the right things. But about a year ago, his cardiologist reviewed a coronary calcium scan and found significant arterial plaque, far more than his age and lifestyle would suggest. Raymond was genuinely stunned. He had been eating carefully for years. He told his cardiologist, "I eat healthy. I've been eating healthy for a long time." And when his cardiologist sat down with him and went through his actual daily diet in detail, something interesting happened. Raymond's healthy diet was quietly working against his arteries in ways he had never been warned about. And his story is not unusual. It plays out in cardiology offices across the country, again and again, with people who are genuinely trying and still being surprised by what their arteries show. So let's start with the first food. And I want to warn you, this one surprises almost everyone. We are talking about fruit juice, specifically commercially processed fruit juice. Orange juice, apple juice, cranberry juice cocktail, grape juice. For generations, a morning glass of juice has been considered a cornerstone of healthy eating. It's associated with vitamins, with energy, with doing something right for your body. But here is what most people don't realize. When you eat a whole orange, the fiber in that fruit slows the absorption of the natural sugars significantly. Your blood sugar rises gently. Your insulin response is moderate. But when you drink a glass of orange juice, that fiber is gone. You are consuming the concentrated sugar of multiple oranges with almost nothing to slow its entry into your bloodstream. What happens next is a rapid blood sugar spike, followed by an insulin surge. And repeated insulin surges, day after day, year after year, drive a process called endothelial dysfunction. The endothelium is the thin inner lining of your arteries, and it is one of the most metabolically active tissues in your entire body. When blood sugar and insulin spike repeatedly, this lining becomes inflamed. It becomes sticky. it begins to lose its smooth, Teflon-like quality and starts to allow cholesterol particles and inflammatory molecules to penetrate the arterial wall. This is how plaque begins, not from cholesterol floating through your blood, but from a damaged arterial lining that can no longer keep that cholesterol out. And the worst part is that many seniors drinking juice daily are doing so because they believe it is supporting their heart. The vitamin C argument is real, but you can get vitamin C from whole fruits and vegetables without the blood sugar consequences. When you reach for that glass of juice tomorrow morning, I want you to remember what I just described and know that a whole orange or a handful of strawberries or a kiwi will give you everything the juice offers without the arterial cost. Now let's move to the second food, and this one requires me to break a myth that has been very stubbornly persistent in American nutrition culture. We are talking about margarine and plant-based spreads marketed as heart-healthy alternatives to butter. For decades, butter was demonized. Saturated fat was named the enemy of heart health. And margarine, made from vegetable oils, was promoted as the responsible choice. Cardiologists recommended it, nutritionists endorsed it, and millions of seniors switched, faithfully, from butter to margarine in the belief that they were protecting their hearts. But what doctors rarely explain is what happened to those vegetable oils during processing. In the manufacturing of stick margarine and many soft spreads, liquid vegetable oils are subjected to a process called partial hydrogenation, which converts them into a semi-solid state. This process creates trans fats. And trans fats, as research eventually made very clear, are among the most damaging substances you can consume for cardiovascular health. They raise LDL cholesterol, the harmful kind, while simultaneously lowering HDL cholesterol, the protective kind. They promote inflammation inside the arterial wall. They impair the function of the endothelium. They accelerate plaque formation in ways that even saturated fat does not. The FDA has moved to restrict industrially produced trans fats, and many margarine formulations have been updated. But here's the catch. Products can legally claim 0 trans fats on the label if they contain less than half a gram of trans fat per serving. Many people eat multiple servings, and certain interesterified fats used in newer formulations to replace trans fats are showing early research signals that suggest they may carry their own metabolic concerns. The safest path for most people over 60 is to use small amounts of real butter, or better yet, extra virgin olive oil, one of the most cardiovascular protective fats in the nutritional literature. Let me tell you about a woman named Patricia. She's 66, lives in a suburb of Chicago, and has been buying the same tub of heart-healthy plant-based spread for nearly 20 years. She was proud of the choice. It was a small daily act of taking care of herself. When her cardiologist recently reviewed her lipid panel and saw her HDL, her protective cholesterol, had dropped significantly over the past decade, she couldn't understand why. She exercised, she didn't eat red meat often, she used her spread faithfully. The conversation about what she was actually spreading on her toast every morning was one she had never had until that appointment. The third food is one that generates some of the strongest surprise reactions, and I understand why. We are talking about whole wheat bread and other whole grain products. I want to be careful here because I am not saying whole grains are uniformly bad. I am saying that the specific products most seniors are actually eating, the commercial whole wheat breads, the multigrain loaves, the whole wheat crackers and wraps, are often very different from what the research on whole grains actually studied. True whole grain products, with minimal processing, visible grain texture, and a short ingredient list, have genuine cardiovascular benefits. The fiber slows digestion, reduces blood sugar response, feeds beneficial gut bacteria, and supports healthy cholesterol levels. But most commercially produced whole wheat bread is made from finely milled whole wheat flour. The fiber is still there on paper, but the grinding process has broken the grain particles down so small that they digest almost as quickly as white flour. The glycemic response is significantly higher than most people expect. And for someone eating 2 or 3 slices of commercial whole wheat bread daily, with their morning eggs, or as a sandwich at lunch, or as toast in the evening, The cumulative blood sugar burden on the arterial lining is real. What you are looking for, if you want bread that genuinely supports cardiovascular health, is bread where you can see and feel the grain texture. Sourdough made with whole grains and long fermentation, dense rye or pumpernickel, Ezekiel-style sprouted grain breads. These products behave fundamentally differently in your body than the soft, pillowy whole wheat loaf sitting in most American bread aisles. And that difference, over years of daily eating, matters enormously for your arteries. Stay with me, because the next two foods are ones that I think will genuinely catch you off guard. The fourth food is low-fat flavored yogurt. Yogurt, in its plain, full-fat form, is a genuinely excellent food. It contains protein, calcium, beneficial probiotics, and healthy fats. But the low-fat flavored varieties that dominate most grocery store dairy sections are a very different product. When manufacturers remove the fat from yogurt, they remove a significant part of what makes it satisfying and slow digesting. To compensate for the loss of texture and flavor, they add sugar, often a great deal of sugar. Some popular low-fat flavored yogurts contain 20 to 25 grams of sugar per serving. That is more sugar than many candy bars. And here is what makes this particularly relevant to arterial health. Fructose, the specific type of sugar used in many yogurt sweeteners and flavorings, is processed almost entirely by the liver. When the liver is overwhelmed with fructose, it converts the excess into triglycerides, which are then released into the bloodstream. Elevated triglycerides are a direct risk factor for cardiovascular disease. They contribute to the formation of small, dense LDL particles, the kind most associated with arterial plaque buildup, and they impair the function of HDL cholesterol. All of this from a food that most seniors are eating because they believe it is a healthy, light, responsible choice. The solution here is beautifully simple. Buy plain, full-fat Greek yogurt. Add your own fresh berries, a drizzle of honey if you want sweetness, and a tablespoon of ground flaxseed for extra fiber and omega-3 fatty acids. You will have a far superior product, nutritionally, metabolically, and for the health of your arteries, than anything in those colorful, low-fat cups. Now, let's talk about the fifth food. And I want you to think about what's sitting in your pantry right now, because this one is in almost every kitchen in America. We are talking about vegetable and seed oils, specifically canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil, and the blended vegetable oils sold in large bottles. These oils have been promoted as heart-healthy for decades, largely because they are low in saturated fat and high in polyunsaturated fatty acids. And for a long time, that was considered enough evidence to endorse them broadly. But what happened next shocked researchers, who began looking more carefully at the specific types of polyunsaturated fats in these oils. The overwhelming majority of the fat in canola, soybean, sunflower, and corn oil is omega-6 fatty acid. Omega-6 fats are not inherently bad. Your body needs them, but they need to be balanced by omega-3 fats. The ideal ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 in the human diet is somewhere between 2-to-1 and 4-to-1. The average American diet, heavily reliant on seed oils for cooking, salad dressings, packaged foods, and restaurant preparation, has an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio closer to 15-to-1, or in some estimates as high as 20-to-1. This extreme imbalance drives a state of chronic, low-level inflammation throughout the body. And inflammation, specifically vascular inflammation, is now understood by cardiovascular researchers to be a central driver of atherosclerosis. Not simply cholesterol, not simply fat, inflammation. When the inner lining of your arteries is chronically inflamed, cholesterol particles become weapons. They penetrate the damaged wall, oxidize, trigger an immune response, and begin forming the plaques that eventually narrow and harden your arteries. The shift away from seed oils toward more stable, less inflammatory cooking fats is one of the most impactful dietary changes a senior can make for long-term cardiovascular health. Extra virgin olive oil, pressed from olives, minimally processed, rich in oleocanthal, which is a natural anti-inflammatory compound, is the gold standard for heart-healthy cooking. Avocado oil is another excellent option, with a higher smoke point that makes it suitable for higher heat cooking. And small amounts of real butter or ghee, which have been unfairly demonized for decades, are far more metabolically stable than the seed oils that replace them. I want to come back to Raymond for a moment. After his cardiologist walked him through his diet and identified the specific patterns we've been discussing today, the daily orange juice, the margarine, the commercial whole wheat bread, the low-fat yogurt he ate every afternoon, and the canola oil he used for everything, Raymond didn't feel defeated. He felt, for the first time in a long time, like he understood what was actually happening. He had been given a map. And a map, even when it shows difficult terrain, is better than wandering without one. Raymond made changes, gradual, sustainable changes, not an overnight overhaul, just steady shifts in the right direction. He replaced his juice with a whole orange. He switched to olive oil for cooking and real butter in small amounts for flavor. He found a sourdough whole grain bread at a local bakery that he genuinely enjoyed. He switched to plain Greek yogurt. And 6 months later, at his follow-up appointment, his triglycerides had dropped significantly. His HDL had improved. His inflammatory markers, which his cardiologist had been quietly watching, had moved in the right direction. Raymond told his cardiologist, "I thought I was already eating healthy. Now I understand what healthy actually means for my arteries." That shift in understanding, that moment of clarity, is what I hope this video gives you today. Because you cannot protect what you don't understand. And the cardiovascular system, despite its complexity, responds in very predictable ways to very specific inputs. Feed it inflammation, blood sugar spikes, and unstable fats, and it gradually deteriorates. Feed it stable fats, real whole foods, controlled blood sugar, and anti-inflammatory nutrients, and it heals. Slowly, sometimes. Incompletely, in some cases, but genuinely, measurably, verifiably. Your arteries retain a remarkable capacity for improvement at any age, and the research that confirms this should feel like genuinely good news. You are not too old to make a difference. You are not past the point where your choices matter. Whether you are 62 or 82, the food decisions you make this week will affect the state of your arteries next year and the year after that. The plaque that hasn't formed yet can still be prevented. The inflammation that is currently active can be reduced. The endothelium that has been stressed and damaged has real capacity to recover, given the right environment. Small changes, made consistently, compound over time in ways that are nothing short of remarkable. One swap in your kitchen, one label you read differently, one conversation with your doctor where you ask a more specific question. These are not small things in the long run. In the long run, they can be the difference between a life that stays active and independent and engaged, and one that contracts around the limitations of a damaged cardiovascular system. If this resonated with you today, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. A spouse, a sibling, a neighbor who's been eating heart healthy for years but isn't sure their efforts are working. You could be giving them a genuine gift. And leave a comment below. I would love to hear what surprised you most in this video, or what change you're going to make first. This community is full of people on the same journey, and your voice matters here. We'll see you in the next one.